there is this very specific feeling that I think almost everyone listening has experienced at some point.
Yeah.
It usually hits pretty early in life. Maybe you're 12 or 13, you're sitting at the dinner table, or you're watching your parents bicker about something totally trivial, or maybe you're just, feeling the general atmosphere of your childhood home.
Right, just absorbing the room.
Exactly. And you get this quiet, just unshakable certainty. You look at the adults raising you and you think to yourself, I'm going to do this differently.
It's the universal vow. I think it's honestly one of the defining moments of growing up.
Yeah.
We look at what was difficult or confusing or just emotionally absent in our childhoods, and we treat those things as markers.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves that simply identifying what hurt us is enough to ensure we don't repeat it. We think, I see the pothole, therefore I will just walk around it.
I see the pothole, so I'm safe. It feels like distance, right?
Oh.
As long as I can see it clearly, I am safe from it. It's almost a survival mechanism.
It is.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into a piece of writing that challenges that safety in a really profound and honestly kind of an unsettling way. We are looking at an essay by the writer and philosopher Pedro Mala titled "The Pattern Does Not End with You."
And we should probably set the stage here right out of the gate. This isn't your typical self-help article.
No, not at all.
It's not a list of 5 ways to break the cycle or how to fix your trauma in 30 days. Maul is doing something much more contemplative, almost architectural with this piece.
Architectural is a great word for it.
Yeah, he's asking us to look at the gap, the often painful gap, between knowing you want to change and the physical, reflexive reality of a pattern continuing through you anyway.
It's a heavy topic,
Yeah.
but a really necessary one. The core tension that Mala explores is this idea that awareness is not a wall. Just because you see the pattern doesn't mean it stops. I think that's the part that really rattled me when I first read it.
That is the big pivot point of the whole essay. We tend to think that awareness is the cure. We live in this age of information where we think if we can just name the thing, we control the thing.
Right, if I have the vocabulary for it, I've beaten it.
Exactly. But Moha argues that the pattern doesn't need your agreement to continue. It doesn't care if you recognize it. It moves through you regardless of your intentions.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really sit with that uncomfortable truth. We want to understand why these behavioral and psychological loops are so incredibly difficult to escape. And we want to move away from that fix-it mentality toward a deeper understanding of what we're actually up against.
It's about understanding the architecture of inheritance. And I don't just mean genes. We know about eye color and height, but the emotional and behavioral architecture we step into the moment we are born.
Let's unpack that architecture, because I think when people talk about generational patterns, they usually talk about copying. It's the classic monkey see, monkey do. Like, oh, my dad had a short fuse, so I have a short fuse. It feels like a direct imitation. But Malha argues it's deeper than just mimicking behavior, right?
Oh, much deeper. And this is a critical distinction if you want to understand why you do what you do.
Yeah.
He says it's often lazily called copying, but the reality is that children grow inside conditions.
Grow inside conditions. That is such a vivid way to put it. It sounds less like a classroom and more like a greenhouse.
That's a perfect analogy. It changes the focus from the action to the atmosphere. A child doesn't just watch a parent yell and decide to yell. The child absorbs what conflict actually looks like. They learn what closeness feels like.
Yeah.
Mala lists these incredibly subtle things that we internalize. We learn what silence means. We learn what attention costs. We learn what is allowed and, crucially, what is considered too much.
That one hit me. What attention costs. It's not a lesson you sit down and study. It's just...
It's the water you swim in.
Yes. It's just the reality of your world.
Think about what that actually means for a kid. If you only got attention when you were achieving something, you learned that love is a transaction based on performance.
Right.
If you only got attention when you were sick or acting out, you learned that crisis is the only currency for connection. These aren't ideas you pick up. They become, as Mala puts it, ways of being. They form the baseline of your reality.
So when you grow up, you aren't just repeating a specific action. You are operating from that same baseline structure.
Right. You're building a new house, but you're using the exact same blueprints you swore you threw away. And this leads to what I think is one of the most fascinating parts of the essay,
Uh.
the paradox of doing the opposite.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. Because I think for a lot of us, doing the opposite is the strategy. That is the grand plan.
Yes, it
If
is.
your parents were chaotic, you become organized. If they were distant, you become super involved. That feels like breaking the pattern.
Yeah.
You look at your life, and on the surface, it looks totally different.
But Malha warns us that this is a trap. He argues that doing the exact opposite is often just the pattern manifesting in reverse. The underlying structure remains exactly the same.
Can we break that down with an example? Because intuitively, doing the opposite feels like the solution. It feels like victory.
Sure. Let's take the example from the text regarding distance. Say you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, very distant. Maybe they were always working or just cold. You felt abandoned.
Okay.
So you vow to be intensely present for your own children or for your partner. You are there for every single moment. You anticipate every need before it's even expressed.
Which sounds like a good thing. That sounds like a good parent or a supportive partner.
On the surface, yes. But Malha points out that this intense presence can carry a pressure of its own. It's a reaction to the distance, so it is defined by the distance.
Oh, I see.
You might be suffocatingly present because you're terrified of the silence. The pendulum has swung to the other side, but the tension, the anxiety regarding connection, is exactly the same.
Wow, so the behavior looks completely different, but the engine driving it is identical. You aren't doing it out of peace, you are doing it out of fear of the alternative.
Correct. Another example he gives is unpredictability. If you experienced a chaotic, unpredictable home, maybe addiction or severe financial instability, you might create a life of rigid stability. Everything is scheduled. Everything is controlled. The house is spotless. The 5-year plan is locked in.
But that stability becomes another form of control.
It becomes a fortress. It's brittle. It's not peace. It's managed anxiety. If one thing goes wrong, if the schedule slips by 10 minutes, the panic that sets in is totally disproportionate. Why? Because the chaos is still the monster in the closet. The surface shifts, but the deeper pattern, the need to manage safety through extreme measures, continues to move.
That is heavy. It implies that we can't just decision our way out of this. You can't just logic your way into a new personality. Which leads to the next big question. Why? If we are smart, self-aware adults and we know we don't want to be like that, why do we still do it? Why does the intellect fail us here?
This is where we have to stop thinking of these patterns as thoughts or choices. We have to start understanding them as physical reflexes. Mala is very clear on this. The pattern is embodied.
So it's not in the mind, it's actually in the nervous system.
Exactly. He writes about the speed of reaction. This is the critical point. The reflex arrives before the thought.
That explains so much. That specific moment where you react to something, maybe you snap at your partner because they used a certain tone of voice, or you shut down completely during a conflict, and a split second later your brain catches up and goes, wait, I didn't want to do that.
But by then, it's already happened. The cortisol is already in your blood. It shows up in the pace of the reaction or the tolerance for tension. Mala talks about the instinct to move away. That's not a cognitive choice. It's a physical impulse, like pulling your hand away from a hot stove.
He mentions the sensation of it too. Even if you manage to stop the behavior, say you actually bite your tongue instead of yelling, the sensation is still there.
Yes, the tension in the chest, the urgency to move away, the shallow breath. That sensation is the pattern. Even if you change the outcome, the fact that your body geared up for that specific fight or flight response means the pattern is still living inside you. Your body is predicting a threat based on a map drawn 30 years ago.
It completely reframes what we consider failure, doesn't it? I think a lot of people listening probably beat themselves up over this. They think, I analyzed this in therapy, I understand it intellectually, so why am I still feeling this way?
Mala offers a lot of grace there. He says the gap between understanding a pattern intellectually and the body responding traditionally is not a failure of effort. It's simply where the pattern lives. It lives in the nervous system, not just the mind. You can't think your way out of a reflex that was programmed before you even had language.
There is a specific image in the essay that I found really haunting. It's about the voice.
Ah, the echo.
Yeah, the echo. The moment where you hear your own voice and you pause, not because of what you said, but because it sounded familiar in a way you really didn't expect.
Malha writes, the sentence is finished, but part of it does not feel entirely your own.
That is such a ghostly description.
It is. It speaks to the idea that we are vessels for these things. We are carrying forward tones, cadences, and silences that belong to people who came before us. You open your mouth to discipline your child or to argue with a spouse, and suddenly your mother is in the room or your father's in the room.
And it's not just a straight line, is it? It's not always parent A does X, so child B does X. The essay talks about nonlinear repetition.
This is crucial for understanding why patterns are so hard to spot. They move sideways. A pattern avoided in one place appears elsewhere. Mala suggests that a silence maintained in one generation might reappear as emotional distance in the next, or a reaction that was held back in childhood emerges later under entirely different conditions.
So it's like water finding a crack. If you block it here, it just leaks out over there.
Exactly. Think of a family where anger was strictly forbidden. The parents never yelled. But the tension of holding back the anger created a cold, sterile environment. So the child grows up and they aren't angry, but they are incredibly anxious and unable to connect vulnerably. The form changed. Anger turned into anxiety, but the disconnection remained.
That sideways movement makes it so tricky. You're looking for the yelling, but you get the cold shoulder, and you don't even realize it's the exact same root system.
And this leads to what Malha calls the lack of fairness. This is a hard truth to swallow. The movement of patterns does not follow fairness. It ignores your intention. It ignores how hard you are trying. It continues through what is available.
What is available? That is a chilling phrase.
It means the pattern takes the path of least resistance. If your nervous system is wired for anxiety, the pattern will use that anxiety.
Yeah.
It doesn't distinguish between the person who is trying to change and the person who isn't. It just moves. It's mechanistic, not moral.
This really challenges the modern obsession with awareness. We live in the age of doing the work. We feel like if we can just name the trauma, label the toxic trait, identify the trigger, then we've won. We can fix it.
And Malha is gently but firmly dismantling that fix-it mentality. He argues that awareness helps you witness the pattern, but it doesn't necessarily stop the movement.
So what is the point of awareness then if it doesn't stop it? If I am going to have the reaction anyway, why bother analyzing it at all?
Because it changes the experience of it. Malha says that you might still react in the old way, but now you see it happening as it is happening.
Instead of not noticing at all.
Right. Previously, you might have just acted out and felt entirely justified. You'd think, they were wrong, I was right to scream. Now, you act out or you feel the urge to, and you recognize it. You say, here's that shape again. Here's that old defense mechanism kicking in. It doesn't resolve it instantly. It doesn't magically undo it, but it shifts the experience slightly. You become a witness to your own inheritance.
But I can see how that would be frustrating for people, to see it happening and still feel completely powerless to stop it. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion from inside the car.
It is frustrating. But Malha points out that trying to fix everything creates a new layer of pressure. If you believe that awareness equals cure, then every time you slip up, every time you repeat a behavior, you view it as a personal failure. You think, I didn't try hard enough.
And that just adds shame on top of the pattern.
Exactly. And shame is like gasoline for these patterns. But if you understand that the structure is larger than your individual will, that it's older than you, it takes some of that burden off. It's not that you aren't trying, it's that you are pushing against a momentum that has been building for generations.
That reminds me of the section on family dynamics, the unspoken hope.
Yes. In families, there is this desperate unspoken hope that things will be different next time, that care and love can draw a boundary around the past. We think, if I just love my kids enough, the bad stuff stops here.
And Malha says,
He says that not everything responds to that boundary. Love is powerful, but it's not a magic eraser. What has taken form over time doesn't always stop just because it has been recognized or because it is uninvited. It can shift, delay, or appear differently, but it continues.
it's interesting because this conversation could feel very pessimistic. You're doomed to repeat the past, nothing matters. But I don't get that vibe from the essay. It feels more honest.
It's deeply honest, and I think there is a strange comfort in that honesty. When you stop fighting the reality of the pattern, when you stop expecting yourself to be a superhuman who can delete history with a thought, you can actually exist in the moment more fully. You can acknowledge the magnitude of what you are carrying.
It moves us from a place of fighting to a place of recognizing.
Yes, it's not about erasing history. It's about acknowledging that what isn't lived through directly can still move forward. You might be carrying a grief you didn't earn or a fear you didn't create. And simply knowing that this feeling isn't entirely mine, can be a form of liberation, even if the feeling stays.
You do not need to remember it for it to continue. That line really stuck with me. It's happening whether we have the specific memory or not.
Because it's in the body.
Mm,
It's in the reflex.
yeah.
And I think that's where the compassion comes in. If you can see that in yourself, you might be able to see it in others. You might look at your parents or your siblings and realize they are also just caught in the movement of something larger. They aren't the villains. They are just the previous vessels.
It does change how you view forgiveness, or at least acceptance. It's less about excusing behavior and more about understanding the mechanics of it.
Precisely. It's seeing the machinery at work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to summarize the philosophy here. If the pattern doesn't need our agreement, and awareness isn't a cure-all, where does that actually leave us?
It leaves us with the responsibility of the witness. We are asked to see the shape of things. Mala's core message is that the pattern doesn't ask to be recognized. It continues through what is already in place. But by witnessing it, by catching that familiar tone or that tension in the chest, we step out of the trance slightly. We may not stop the river, but we can stop drowning in it.
And perhaps that small shift, that slight delay between the impulse and the action, or even just the recognition after the fact, is where the real work happens, not in the grand declaration of never again, but in the quiet, messy reality of, oh, there it is again.
I think that's right. It's about humility in the face of our own history. It's about knowing that we are part of a very long story.
I want to leave the listener with this final thought from the essay because I think it's something you can chew on for a long time. Maha writes that a situation can feel known not because you've lived it, but because the shape is recognizable.
And that leads to the most provocative idea of all. The pattern does not begin with you. And contrary to what we all want to believe, it does not always end where you expect it to.
Something to think about the next time you hear a familiar echo in your own voice. Thanks for diving in with us.
Thank you.